I would like to show you a few more things in this example. Block elements have 100% of the width of the parent by default. We are going to learn all about it soon, don't worry. So we have a body tag, which is by default 100% of a browser window, and we have a section in it, so by default the section would be also 100%. Let's see it in our example. Let's change the width of the section to 100%. Let's save our file. Let's refresh our page. And now you can see that our section takes up the whole 100% of its parent, which is the body tag, which is actually our browser window. Of course, you can see those margins right here on the edges, but we will be talking about the margins in the later part of this course. Let's get it back to 50%, how it was. Let's save it, refresh the page. And here you can see our div tag, which is a child of a section. So as you can see, it has 80% right here of the width of the section. It's not 80% of the browser window or 80% of the body tag, but it's always 80% of its parent, which is in this case our section. In our div, we can see our p tag right here, the gray one with the text in it right here. And as we can see in our code, it has 33.333% of the width of its parent, which is in this case the div tag right here, this one. The browser will compute it perfectly so that it will be 1/3 of our div tag. If we would like to, we can place many of these threes or put it only with 2 after the dot or 1, but we can be precise like this to set its width to exact 1/3 of its parent, which is the div. Now let's change the width of the div to 1M, for example. Let's save it. Let's refresh our website. And this is the effect we will get. M and RAM units refers to font size, so we don't use these units when it comes to the width and height of the elements, because the effect might surprise us, like you can see in this example right here. So let's change it. This time, for example, to 200 pixels. Let's save it, refresh the page. As you can see, we can use pixels or percentages for these properties with no problem. But now if we will use pixels, keep in mind that it will be a constant value no matter how big or small our window screen will be right now. Let me show this to you. Let's make the browser window smaller. And you can see that our section is getting smaller, but our div is a constant value of 200 pixels. Now, even though that our p tag is 33.3% of the div is always 200 pixels. So in this case, the width of the p tag will also be a constant value, which is the 1/3 of 200 pixels. You can see it exactly right here. Now we are on Pixabay, where there are plenty of free to use images, which can be used on our websites, for example. I recommend you to save this website. It comes in handy when you need to find an image for your website quickly. So let's choose an image, for example this one. If you will be using Pixabay for your websites, the most important thing is keeping attention to the license agreement, and what you're probably interested in are those quotes exactly, where we got Pixabay license, free for commercial use, and no attribution required. So with these licenses, you can use these pictures on your websites however you want without specifying the author. But that's just a side disclaimer. Let's go back to our image. Let's click it with the right mouse button. Here we can copy image, or we can open it in a new tab. Let's click the opening in the new tab like this. And we got this image open right here. And now what we want to do is to copy the URL of this picture to our clipboard. With the right mouse button, click and copy like this. And now we will import it on our website. I created a new document with the basic HTML structure. Now let's place the img tag in our body tag like this. And what we want to do now is to place our URL for our picture as a value to the src attribute. Let's paste it like this. Let's save our project, refresh our page, and here we can see our picture in its default size. So we get the scroll bar right here. So let's make the window bigger like this. And it's always good to place the alternative text suggesting what is on the picture. Let it be something like this, boats on water. Let's save our project. Now what I wanted to show you is that the image placed in the img tag has always its default and original size. So that if you make our browser window smaller, like this, the image stays in the same size. All we get is those scroll bars, no matter how big or small our browser window is. Let's put it back. Let's open our DevTools. Let's dock him to the bottom. It'll be easier for us. Let's check our image like this. You can see its size right here. It's 960 times 640 pixels. Let's click it. And we can see its size in the computed tab. When we scroll down to its height, which is computed right here, where we have height, 640 pixels, and its width, which we can see right here, which is the width property, and the value 960 pixels. That's exactly what is shown when we click the image right here. Now let's create a style tag in our project. Let's make a rule for our img tag. And let's set its width to 200 pixels. Let's save it. Let's refresh the page. And voila. Now you can see that our image has its width set to 200 pixels, which we can see by hovering on it. It's 200 pixels width and 133.333 pixels height, as we can see it in the rules tab right here, and in our computed tab exactly right here. So we have a full control of how this image should look on our website. But note that this image is still proportional. If we only change its width, its height will be automatically adjusted to keep its aspect ratio. And of course, it works both sides. We can only set its height, and then its width will be set automatically, keeping its original proportions. So we can change this property from the width to the height like this. Let's save it. Let's refresh our website, and voila. Now our image has 300 pixels of its width and 200 pixels of its height. Let's make it bigger a little bit. Let's set it to 600 pixels. Refresh the page. Now its height is set to 600 pixels. So let's change it to its width to be 600 pixels. Let's save it, refresh the page, and voila. We can set both its height and its width manually, but we have to remember that if we use wrong proportions, this image will be stretched or shrunken. Let me show this to you. Let's go to our code again. We have its width set to 600 pixels, so let's set its height for 200 pixels, for example. Let's save it, refresh the page, and you can see it that now our image is stretched. Let's switch those values. Width to 200 pixels, height to 600. Save it, refresh it, and now you can see that our image is shrunken. So let's keep it how it was. Let's set only its width to 600 pixels, like this. Because usually we don't want to shrink or stretch the images on our website. Usually we care about the original aspect ratio of the images, so we only set one value while the other is determined automatically. Usually we set the width manually, but sometimes it happens that we want the appropriate height of the image. Of course, we can use percentages as well. Let me show this to you. Let's set the width of this image to 50%. Let's save it, refresh, and now you can see it on your screen. This is of course the 50% of the parent element, which is in our case the body tag, which is by default the whole browser window except those margins on the edges. So now no matter how big or small the browser window will be, our image will always have 50% of its width. Let me show this to you. Like this. We can change the size of our browser window, make it smaller, make it bigger, make it full screen. Our image will take always 50% of the width of its parent, which is the body tag, which is by default our browser window. Now let's place our img tag inside a div tag. Like this. Let's save it. Let's refresh the page. And you can see that nothing happened. Because this newly created div has also 100% of the width of the parent, which is the body size, which is the browser of our window. Every block element like div, section, or p has 100% of the width of the parent. Every img tag with an image inside has its default image size in pixels. So now let's do something else. Let's go to our styles tag. Let's create a rule for our div. And let's set its width to 50%. Let's save it. Let's refresh our page. And now our image takes 1/4 of the width of the body tag. And here's why. Let's open our DevTools. Here we have our HTML element. Inside it, we have our body, which you can see right here. Inside our body, we have our div, which has 50% of the width of the body, which you can see right here. And inside our div, we have our img tag, which has exactly 50% of our div. Now, if we set our img to have 100% of its parent, let's save it. Let's refresh the page. we can see that now our IMG has 100% of the width of the div, which is 50% of the body. If we set our IMG's width to 0, it becomes invisible. If its width is 0, it means that it has no width, so it's not visible. We don't do that on our websites, but I wanted to show you that 0 as a value needs no unit. It don't have to be 0% or 0 pixels or 0 or rem. Of course, it will also work with these units, as you can see, or pixels, for example, like this. But 0 as a value needs no unit at all. Opposite to 100, because if we place 100, it won't work. This property now is not recognized, and this image has its original size now. Just like if this property would not exist. Let's comment it, save, refresh. It's the same. So 100 needs to have its unit, for example, pixels, like this, percentages, like this, etc., etc. Only 0 needs no unit. Every other numeric value has to be placed with a unit. One more thing I wanted to show you. Placing a space between the number and the unit will be an error. As we can see, it's the original size, so it didn't work. If we place pixels right here, it would be an error as well. Nothing changed. So keep in mind that the unit has to be placed directly after the number in our value. Just like this. Now we can see it's 100 pixels. Now let's go back to some theory. Let's go back to the presentation for a moment and learn about other relative units that might be useful to us. So let's get to know the viewport units. Viewport height, which is VH, and viewport width, which is VW. Viewport means nothing but a browser window. So viewport width and viewport height always refer to the browser window on your device, computer monitor, smartphone, or tablet. So if something takes 100 viewport width, it is actually 100% of the width of the browser window. If something takes 8 viewport height, it actually occupied the 8% of the browser window height. So these units work like normal percentages, but do not refer to the parent element like the normal percentages, but always to the browser window, regardless of the size of the parent element. Viewport is always a responsive value. As we can see in this example, the height of the yellow element remains unchanged, while its width always occupies 30% of the width of the viewport, which is the browser window, regardless of whether we display it on a computer monitor or smartphone. So viewport is always responsive and depends only on the browser window, not on the parent element. Before we move on to the further practice, let's first learn the basic properties of CSS so that we can practice the basic properties together with the units.